We are learning section 32 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which tells us about how we can live Jewish, not just pray, but everything about our life can be done in a Jewish way. And I divided the whole Kitzur Shulchan Aruch into these 14 general sections. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch goes through the process of, in chronological order, from when one wakes up through the course of the day, the week, the year, and the lifetime. And so we started today, we spoke about davening, learning. Most recently, we've been learning about proper conduct. And within proper conduct, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch dedicates 5 sections that give us a really nice overall perspective of how the Torah would like us to conduct ourselves. We started by talking about midos, good character traits. We spoke about what to stay away from as far as lashon hara and negative speech. We spoke about living for a higher purpose. And most recently, we are learning about keeping healthy. This section 32, is taken almost entirely out of the Rambam. I did mention that it's quite interesting because although the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which means the abridged version, Kitzur means abridged, although it was only written a little over 100 years ago, based on the original Shulchan Aruch, there are instances where he has sections which are not found in the original Shulchan Aruch. So this is one of them. This whole section from the Rambam that tells us how we should live in a healthy way is not found in the Shulchan Aruch. In fact, although it was taught by the Rambam, it was taught with a level of connection to Hashem that this too is considered Hashem's wisdom. Nonetheless, our bodies have since changed. And so although it is part of Torah, part of Hashem's wisdom, nonetheless, it would be under condition of the bodies as they were at the time of the Rambam, since then our bodies are not quite up to peak as they were back then. And therefore, as the Rambam himself mentions at the end of the section, things may change according to current conditions. And so although most of what we're learning will be particularly significant and relevant, some sections we might need to defer rather to our local, I was going to say local Orthodox rabbi, but I meant to say local doctor, so that he can advise what is most appropriate. But even those sections which we learn, which do not apply today, are still part of Torah, part of Hashem's wisdom. And by learning what we are learning, we are doing a mitzvah. So let's take a look. Just to summarize what we did already discuss over the last 2 days, we spoke about how being healthy is necessary in order to be able to do what Hashem wants, in order to be able to serve Him. We spoke about, the Rambam gave an analogy of just as you need to fuel a fire, otherwise the fire will die, so our bodies have life, and that life needs to be fueled as well with food in the right way. If you don't give enough fuel to the fire, it will die. If you give too much fuel to the fire, it will also go out. The Rambam speaks actually about, we mentioned that, I see section number 3 was about how much to eat. The Rambam says that actually somebody who eats a lot of healthy food to the point that he's absolutely stuffed will be in a less healthy state than somebody who eats unhealthy foods in moderation. Quite interesting. In other words, he's saying that more unhealthy than the type of food is how much of it you're eating. He spoke about how often a person eats will vary according to the age and the seasons of the year. About it, at different times of the year, a person eats more or less. You could take a look at look at the last YouTubes or look it up online at jti.com/live. There's a link to it. Before and after eating, he spoke about how a person prepares themselves for a meal, while they eat, what they should do, and once they're finished eating, what they should do. He spoke about how the food should be opposite to one's temperament and to the weather conditions. If somebody is naturally, their body gets very hot, it's good for them to eat cooler foods. If somebody is very cold, it's good for them to eat hot foods, meaning both spicy and in temperature. And that would obviously apply to the times of year as well. In the winter, hotter foods, and in the summer, colder foods. This is what the Rambam has told us. He spoke a lot about different types of food and which foods are more healthy and which foods are less healthy. He spoke about when to eat, how to eat, to chew, and that brings us now to section halacha number 17. Let us take a look. drinking. And I actually believe that this would be one of those instances where, since our bodies have since changed, the words of the Rambam will not quite apply the same way, to the best of my knowledge. Let us see. We've already noted that people are not all alike in their temperaments, so that each person should follow physician's advice and accordingly choose the food that is best for them, according to their temperament. So again, a person needs to have their own dietitian that will advise which foods are good for them. There's no set rules in stone. You hear somebody saying that, oh, this food, nobody should be eating it, or this food, everybody should be eating it. That's not necessarily the case. That's why a person needs to have a dietitian, and based on their needs, see which foods are most appropriate for them. In general terms, though, the ancient physicians divided foodstuffs into various grades. There are foods that are extremely detrimental. So this actually takes us back to types of food here. And it is recommended to never eat them. These include large fish that are salted and aged. So I don't know. I guess it's not sushi, because sushi is not aged and it's not salted. It is raw, but it's not large. Aged salted cheese, he says, is not good. If you're getting some real Swedish cheeses, truffles and mushrooms. I think today mushrooms are very healthy, but maybe because today we've discerned between some mushrooms and others. Aged salted meat, that sounds to me like bulton. Unfermented wine from the press, meaning if you're just taking wine out from the press, but it's neither fresh grape juice nor fermented. And any cooked food that has been left to the point that it gives off an odor. And if you're ever wondering, you have something in your fridge, is it good, is it not good? What I have found to always be effective is to smell it. If it smells okay, then I've never had an instance of a food that smells okay and wasn't good or didn't taste okay. So that goes by odor. That's extremely unhealthy. If the food smells bad, stay away at all costs. I guess one exception to that would be maybe milk, because even after milk goes off, it can still be used for different dairy products. At least today, that is. Likewise, any food that has a bad smell or a very bitter taste is likely deadly poison to the body. Fortunately, we know of a gentleman from the Jewish community who was said to be a Holocaust survivor, although that was a little bit debated. And recently he passed away, and the story goes that he had some old cheese blintzes in the back of his fridge, and he didn't want to waste any food, and he ate it. And they say that food poison actually killed him. Some of you might know who I'm talking about. There are other foods that are harmful, but not as detrimental as those already mentioned. So whatever we've mentioned so far is really bad, like off food, but other stuff is not great, but not too bad. Therefore, it is recommended to eat them only in small quantities and at long intervals. Don't be in the habit of making them your regular diet or part of your regular diet. So these include large fish, which I guess it means cooked now, cheese, milk that has been left for more than 24 hours since it was milked. Maybe now with refrigeration that's changed. The meat of large oxen, if you've got a real good piece of beef, or large male goats, barley bread, interestingly, matzah, cabbage, leeks, onions, garlic, mustard, and radishes. All of these are harmful, and it is recommended that one eat only a little of these and only during the winter, but in the summer one should not eat these at all. Again, check with your local doctor or dietitian. But I guess the Rambam is saying that we should have this hierarchy. Some foods we never eat. Some foods, it's okay. You don't need to be so extreme. You can eat it, but just not too often. And there are other foods that are harmful, but not to the same degree as those mentioned. These include water birds like geese and duck, young pigeons, dates, bread that was kneaded with oil, fine flour that has been so thoroughly sifted that no hint of bran remains. It is not recommended to eat much of these foods. So this is quite interesting because in Jewish tradition, bread takes quite a prominent role. And that's why whenever we have an honorable meal, we have a loaf of bread or two breads on Shabbos. And people may wonder, how does that fit in modern findings, which encourage staying away from bread? So firstly, again, even nobody's saying today that bread today is poison. They're just saying it's not the best of all. But quite interestingly, the Rambam says that if the flour is so finely sifted, then that's no good. He already mentioned it actually earlier in the chapter. So that would kind of fit that with today. Doctors will certainly say that whole wheat bread or other types of health breads are healthier, which is actually in line with the Rambam, since there's other stuff in it too. It's not all you're left with is the perfect flour, which once upon a time was actually the most expensive before they had the machinery of today. Today it's already in the reverse. Then that's not healthy at all. So the Rambam is discouraging eating white bread. Okay, now this is again another example of where things have changed. I believe you should always abstain from eating tree fruits, even when they're dried. You should not eat too many of them, and certainly not when they are fresh. But before they have ripened fully, they are like swords to the body. Meaning, certainly don't eat a fruit that is not yet ripe. Carobs too are always harmful. All tart fruits are harmful, and they should be eaten only in small portions during the summer or in hot climates. Figs, grapes, and pomegranates are always beneficial, so those are exceptions to the rules. Whether fresh or dried, and you may eat them as much as you need. Nevertheless, you should not eat them constantly, though they are the best of all tree fruits. So he starts off by discouraging fruits, but he makes exception to figs, grapes, and pomegranates, where he says you can have as much of them as you want, but not too much. Again, check with your local dietitian. What's relevant for us is A, this is still part of the wisdom of Hashem, even if it doesn't apply today, and B, we still get the principle of grading which foods we should eat and how often they should be eaten. Now, drinking, again, here the Rambam it's not like it was back there. Water is the natural liquid for a human being and for the health of the body. If they are pure and clear, they are beneficial in that they maintain the body's moisture and hasten the ejection of waste. When you drink water, it's preferable that it be cold because it quenches thirst and improves digestion more than water that is not cold. But it should not be very cold because that extinguishes the natural heat of the body. If the water is too cold, then that's not great either. The body needs to have some level of warmth. All the more so when you're tired and exhausted, you should be very careful not to drink very cold water. But then the fat of the heart is heated and melted because of tiredness and exhaustion. And cold water is harmful to the point that you might be endangered. So if you're really hot, don't go for extremely cold water. Be interesting to hear from the doctors if that exists today. Chas v'shalom, you don't want to be endangered. Now, although water is good for the health of the body, nevertheless, you should not drink too much of it. I don't believe is what is relevant for our bodies today. You should not drink water before a meal, for it will cool down the stomach and will not be able to digest the food properly. During the meal, too, you should not drink anything other than a bit of water mixed with wine. Only once the food has begun to be digested should you drink a moderate serving of water. So the Rambam actually is saying no water before the meal, no water while you eat, but rather a little after you've eaten. That's the time to drink water. Likewise, you should not drink water when you exit the bathhouse, which would be an exhausting experience. People would go into these very hot, like saunas, which would be once a week, which that kind of cleared out all any dirt from their system, from their bodies. Before they had plumbing as we have it today, so that the liver is not chilled. Certainly, you should not drink in the bathhouse. Likewise, you should not drink water directly after intercourse, but then your natural heat is weakened and it will cause the livers to become chilled. I don't believe this applies today, but I remember actually once sitting with some guy, and he said, "No, I follow the Rambam," but he wouldn't drink. And I thought he was making a mistake because I believe that all authorities today are in agreement that, as we said, the Rambam said that his instructions were to a particular body, and our bodies are not of such today. So we actually don't have the license to just say, I'm simply following the Rambam in this particular context as far as health is concerned. A little more about drinking. Wine, on the other hand, fortifies the natural heat, improves digestion, helps to eject excess waste, and aids the health of the body, as long as you drink in moderate measure. If your head is weak, avoid wine, for it will make you weaker and fill your head with fumes. Wine is good for older people, but harmful for youngsters, for it arouses a natural heat and is like adding fire to fire. You should avoid wine until the age of 21. So here we have age restriction on alcohol, which goes back almost 1,000 years. Quite an interesting one. He says, stay away from wine until you're 21. And the reason isn't because you won't drink responsibly, but he's actually saying that for youngsters, wine is not healthy. For people that are older, it's very healthy. It is not recommended to drink wine before a meal except a little in order to open up the innards, nor when you're hungry, have just exited the bathhouse or sauna, or have just exercised and worked hard. During the meal, you should drink only a little. So that is as far as drinking is concerned. Now, I'm moving at a faster pace because the general focus of our 5 o'clock Living Jewish year is on what's super practical. And hopefully there are some practical points you can pick up along the way. Okay, now when to eat. Interesting, we already mentioned this earlier. I'm not sure why he goes back to it again. But you should never eat unless you're hungry, nor drink unless you're thirsty, nor wait to go to the bathroom for even one moment. That's something that appears not just in the Rambam, but in Jewish law as well. A person should never hold themselves back from relieving themselves. You should also, even if a person's in shul and the rule of davening, a person should certainly excuse themselves and take off their talis and tefillin and look after their health. In fact, if a person urgently needs to go to the bathroom and they daven, we mentioned earlier that the davening wouldn't even count if they were ready. They would have to daven again because such a davening is abominable. Don't eat until you have thoroughly checked whether you need to eliminate, meaning whether you need to go to the bathroom. So he says, actually, before you sit down to eat, first try to check in with your body to see whether you need to relieve yourself, and only then sit down for a meal. A theme that comes up again and again throughout, I guess, Jewish writing is the importance of a person sitting down for structured meals. And the benefits are tremendous on so many fronts. It helps as far as knowing which bracha to make when. It helps for as far as etiquette. It helps as far as health. And on so many fronts. So this would be another example. Check that you're ready to sit down, and then sit down and eat like a bench. Okay. You should always endeavor to keep your bowels lax throughout your life. Approaching a mild diarrheic state, meaning a person should make sure always that their stomach is more fluidy than stiff. A general rule of health is that whenever there is constipation or difficulty in relieving oneself, harmful illnesses are on the way. Therefore, if you see that your bowels have weakened and have lost the power of relieving oneself, one should consult doctors for advice on how to loosen them. Each person according to his temperament and age. If a person is struggling to relieve themselves, then they should seek medical advice, as this is dangerous for their health. It could lead them to getting sick, God forbid. Exercise. Let's learn about exercise. A moderate amount of exercise is good for the body's health. As mentioned already earlier, he spoke about exercising before sitting down to eat. But strenuous exercise and rest are detrimental to the body. He means resting more than necessary, as we'll see soon. In the summer, one should exercise only a little, and during the winter, you need more. Maybe because of the heat, a person needs to look after their health. A fat person must exercise more than a thin one. So we have some good records over here that take us over 800 years back, that if you're putting on weight, then it's time to go to... it's time to do some laps in the pool or whatever it is. I see the time is 5:20. Thank you so much for joining us. Please God, tomorrow we will continue to learn about sleeping and about washing and a few other healthy practices.